Hi everyone, it's Mr. Wyman again, and I'm going to be reading today Brer Rabbit Goes Fishing for Suckers. Before reading this story, I want to go over some elements or ingredients of fiction and stories. I've talked about these things before in a separate video and in teaching, and you know what these are, but in getting the most out of a text, out of these trickster tales, it's important to understand these ideas. Characters, like I said, in these particular African American trickster tales that we're going over now with Brer Rabbit, the characters are always animals. And there's a neat word called anthropomorphism, which means animals acting like people. Either way, though, the animals in these stories take the place of people, and we talked about that a little bit yesterday. When you're reading the texts, it's important to take a look at how the characters behave, and there's cause and effect relationships there all the time. But you should be figuring out what kind of character each animal is, and the story tells you that. Would you trust Brer Rabbit? What kind of character is he? Would you trust Brer Fox? Which animal from the story that I'm going to read for you today would you be more likely to be friends with? For me, probably the raccoon. And you know why? Because I don't know the raccoon. There isn't that much information in this story about the raccoon, but the qualities of the other characters are kind of I don't know. Why do I say that? Well, listen to the story to find out. The other thing to consider in a fictional tale, any fictional tale, or nonfiction for that matter, is the setting. In the story that we're going to listen to today, a huge part of the setting is a well. And what is a well? Well, you have to understand, a well is a homonym. Well, you have to understand what that is. And in different eras, it was different things. And in different places of the world, it's different things too. A well would be a pretty important thing during the time of slavery back in the 18th century and 19th century, because people didn't have running water, right? So going to fetch water from a well would be an actual thing that slaves had to do. And having to clean out and replant a peanut grove. That's how this story begins. That is a very typical setting for the people who would have shared and listened to this story, farming in general. Nowadays, unless you helped your parents with a garden or something, you probably wouldn't know what it is to work hard, digging things up, cleaning up a garden and replanting, and then waiting for it to actually grow, and then having some animal come and steal all of the vegetables that you worked hard to plant. That's intense. And I know it's just a fun story to read and listen to, but unless you had that experience, you wouldn't know. And I've never had anybody steal my vegetables, but I've experienced where the weather went bad and all of a sudden everything I've done is gone, and I don't have to count on my garden in order to live the way people back in the day would have. The plot is always very important, and the plot is the events, right? I'm going to read this out loud actually. A story is made up of events or things that happen. The order of events is called a story's plot. Each character takes actions that cause events to happen. So, and sometimes plots can be affected by previous stories. Like this story that I'm going to read to you today, there's a reason why Fox had to replant his peanut grove, and it's because Brer Rabbit stole all the peanuts. I find it really interesting at the beginning of the story that the author or storyteller actually talks about that, and the fact that Brer Rabbit actually helps out with this chore. And the last thing on this page is illustrations, and that's not always a big deal, but in this text it is. So check out the pictures. I hope you enjoy this story. Everyone on the old plantation felt sorry for BRER Fox. He had worked so hard all spring on his peanut patch, clearing and planting and sowing, only to have his harvest stolen. So all the creatures gathered together to help BRER Fox plant a new patch of peanuts. BRER Bear, BRER Raccoon, and even BRER Rabbit showed up to help BRER Fox replant. BRER Rabbit was feeling guilty because he was the one who had stolen all the peanuts, so he helped too. They got busy clearing the peanut patch, pulling up the old vines, and making rows to plant new ones. Now the weather was mighty hot, and soon BRER Rabbit, who wasn't much of a worker in the first place, got tired. BRER Rabbit didn't want others to know that he was tired. He knew full well that he was a lazy creature, but he hated for others to know, so he needed a plan. "Is anyone hot?" asked BRER Rabbit, wiping the sweat from his nose. "I am," said BRER Bear. "Me too," said BRER Fox. "Me 3, added BRER Raccoon. Well then, suppose I go get us some water," said BRER Rabbit, running off into the nearby woods before anyone could say otherwise. The woods were nice and shady, and BRER Rabbit felt much better being out of the heat. As he looked about, he saw an old stone well with 2 buckets hanging from the top. BRER Rabbit was supposed to be fetching water, but that wasn't his first thought. His first thought was how nice and cool it would be to take a little bath. So into one of the buckets he hopped, and down he went. At first, the water was nice and cool, but then it got really cool, and soon after that, it turned quite cold. BRER Rabbit started to shiver and decided it was time to go up. There was only one problem. He had no way to raise himself to the top. He had left the other bucket on the ground at the top of the well. BRER Rabbit started to get scared. There he was, alone and cold in the bottom of a well, far away from everyone else. As a matter of fact, he wasn't that far away from everyone. BRER Fox never let BRER Rabbit go too far out of sight. He knew that BRER Rabbit was always plotting something, so he had followed BRER Rabbit. From behind a nearby tree, BRER Fox had seen BRER Rabbit hop into the bucket. Now, why is he going down there? BRER Fox thought to himself. There's nothing down there but cold water, and BRER Rabbit's much too smart to get himself stuck down there for no good reason. He must be keeping something in that old well, something he doesn't want to see. Now, here I want to point out the fact that the BRER Fox is relying on what he knows already of BRER Rabbit's character. This is something that you need to keep in, you as a reader need to keep in mind as you read text. You're going to be learning about the characters in the text, and you can rely on the character traits of those characters in order to understand and make predictions, right? So, BRER Fox is making a prediction that BRER Rabbit is up to something. And what does he base that on? The fact that BRER Rabbit is typically a trickster. Alright, back to text. BRER Fox thought he had it all figured out. The old well must be where BRER Rabbit kept his treasures. What treasures BRER Fox didn't know, but he decided right then and there to make a deal with BRER Rabbit. BRER Rabbit! His voice echoed down the well to the shivering rabbit. What are you doing down there? BRER Rabbit knew that BRER Fox was his only chance to get out. He thought quickly and answered, "I'm fishing for suckers." "Are there many of them down there?" asked BRER Fox. "Scores and scores," said BRER Rabbit. "Come on down and see." BRER Fox knew that there weren't any suckers down there, but he didn't want to see BRER Rabbit's treasure. So he hopped into the second bucket and down he went. As he rode down, BRER Rabbit started riding up in the other bucket. This is called a counterweight. Halfway down, going pretty fast, BRER Fox passed BRER Rabbit, who was singing this song. "Goodbye, BRER Fox, take care of your clothes, for this is the way the world goes. Some go up and some go down, but you'll get to the bottom safe and sound." BRER Fox just waved goodbye in confusion. When he reached the bottom, he began looking around for the treasure. Sometime later, BRER Rabbit sent the others to help him out. And ever since then, whenever BRER Rabbit wanted a good laugh, he'd ask BRER Fox if he'd like to go fishing for suckers. The word sucker is used, it's pretty negatively used for somebody who's been tricked, right? They've fallen for a trick. They've been suckered. Another use of the word suckers could be like leeches that will like grab onto your skin and actually suck blood out of you. And I wonder if that's what BRER Rabbit, like what this story was kind of like angling at, like if BRER Rabbit was kind of acting like that's what he was trying to get, was leeches. Those could be bait if you were to go fishing, right? So this story is actually, this is a different version than what I'm familiar with. The one I'm familiar with, BRER Rabbit tricks Fox into thinking that there's cheese at the bottom of the well because Fox sees the reflection of the light coming from the sky into the well. So this is like a slightly different version than what I'm familiar with. And that's what happens with these kinds of folk tales. They get told and retold, and they are slightly different. I kind of like the fishing for suckers thing because it plays on the word. It's a word play on what happens to Fox. Poor BRER Fox.